Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart walked briskly down the polished corridors of Joint Base Langley Eustis, her boots clicking against the gleaming floors. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows over the hall, lined with portraits of military icons and battle-hardened heroes. It was just another day at a base, where the Army, Navy, and Air Force intersected in an uneasy alliance. But Emily could feel the tension lingering in the air, like static before a storm. Today, she was going to challenge authority, and she knew the risk. Emily's mind replayed the logistics briefing she had reviewed the night before. For weeks, she had pored over operational data, comparing deployment schedules, supply manifests, and maintenance reports. Something didn't add up. A particular plan for troop rotations and armored vehicle distribution was flawed. If implemented, it would have caused massive delays, potentially putting lives at risk. The numbers were not just slightly off, they were dangerously misleading. Emily knew she couldn't stay silent. The briefing room was already packed when she arrived. Senior officers filled the seats, faces stern and expectant. At the head of the room stood Major General Marcus Drayton, a man whose reputation for discipline was matched only by his intolerance for dissent. He cleared his throat, his voice echoing across the room. "We have reviewed the supply chain plan for the upcoming Atlantic deployment. I expect full compliance from all departments. Questions will be addressed at the end." His tone left no room for challenge. Emily, however, didn't hesitate. She raised her hand, feeling the eyes of the room shift toward her. "Sir," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins. "With all due respect, there's a critical issue in the rotation schedule. If executed as written, it will create a 2-day gap in armored vehicle readiness in the Norfolk sector." A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. Officers exchanged glances, some impressed, others anxious. Drayton's eyes narrowed. "Explain," he demanded, the calm authority in his voice masking a flicker of irritation. Emily stepped closer to the projector screen, pointing to a set of charts she had meticulously prepared. Here, the deployment timeline overlaps with maintenance schedules. Units are scheduled for transit before vehicles are fully inspected. The result is a logistical bottleneck. Vehicles could be delayed by up to 48 hours, leaving personnel in vulnerable positions. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. The solution is a staggered maintenance plan and revised departure schedule, which I've outlined here. The room was silent, every eye on Drayton. For a moment, it seemed the general might dismiss her outright. But instead, his jaw tightened, his hands clenching at the podium. "And you're certain this is correct?" he asked, his voice low, almost a growl. "I triple-checked, sir," Emily replied firmly. "The data aligns with operational standards and safety protocols. Ignoring this could jeopardize both equipment and personnel." A long pause stretched uncomfortably. Then Drayton's lips pressed into a thin line. "Very well," he said, a hint of reluctant acknowledgement in his voice. "Make sure your numbers are flawless. I will review them personally." Emily nodded, hiding the surge of satisfaction she felt. She had survived the first volley, but the glance Drayton shot her was sharp, almost predatory. She sensed a brewing storm. In the military, correcting a superior could earn respect, but it could also paint a target on your back. She had chosen to risk everything for truth and duty. After the meeting, Emily walked to her office, her mind racing. She knew whispers would follow. Indeed, as she passed the corridor lined with cubicles, she caught snippets of conversation. "She embarrassed the general," said one junior officer, shaking his head. "Bold move," muttered another, clearly impressed. Emily ignored them, focusing instead on the data files in her hand. She had faith that competence would outshine politics, but deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. By afternoon, the undercurrent of tension had intensified. Emily received a terse email from the general's office. Schedule a meeting immediately. Her stomach tightened. Being summoned by Drayton rarely meant a friendly chat. She entered his office to find him standing behind a polished oak desk, arms crossed. The office was decorated with awards, maps, and the faint scent of leather and coffee. Drayton's expression was unreadable. "Lieutenant Commander Hart," he began, his tone controlled but cold, "your comments this morning were unconventional. Bold, even. Some might say insubordinate." Emily stood tall, maintaining her composure. "Sir, my intent was never insubordination. My goal is to ensure operational safety and mission success." Drayton walked slowly around the desk, eyeing her critically. "Your intent is noted. But in the military, perception matters as much as facts. I would caution you, questioning a superior publicly has consequences." Emily's heartbeat quickened. She knew he could initiate formal reprimands, or even attempt to remove her from sensitive projects. But she did not flinch. "With all due respect, sir, the consequences of inaction could be far worse than the consequences of speaking the truth." Drayton stopped, staring at her with an unreadable expression. He let out a slow sigh, then gestured toward the door. "Return to your duties, Lieutenant Commander. But be aware, you have made waves today. Some will not forget." Emily nodded, exiting the office, the tension in her chest mingling with a strange sense of triumph. She had survived the first test, but she knew the general's pride had been wounded. Battles in the corridors of power could be just as perilous as those in the field. Back at her desk, Emily stared at the charts and reports she had prepared, aware that the coming days would challenge not only her skills, but her courage. Already, she sensed the subtle shift among colleagues. Some avoided eye contact, others whispered encouragement. She knew she could count on very few allies. Yet despite the undercurrent of danger, a spark of determination flared within her. Emily understood the stakes. Speaking truth to power was never easy, especially in the hierarchical world of the military. But she also knew that protecting her team and the mission depended on it. That day, she realized something essential. Bravery wasn't only measured in combat zones. It could also be measured in moments like this, standing firm when everyone expected silence. The storm had begun quietly in the fluorescent-lit corridors of a Virginia military base, and Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart was ready. The day after the briefing, Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart sensed the subtle shift immediately. The whispers were sharper now, the glances colder. Officers who had once nodded at her ideas now avoided eye contact, and some subtly rolled their eyes when she entered her room. Emily had always known that challenging authority carried risks, but the reality was harsher than she had imagined. Major General Marcus Drayton's pride had been wounded, and wounded pride in a man of his stature was a dangerous thing. By mid-morning, Emily began to notice the first overt signs of retaliation. Her reports, which had previously been routed directly to senior officers for review, were now misplaced or delayed indefinitely. Emails went unanswered. Meeting invites disappeared from her calendar. Subtle remarks about following the chain of command or knowing one's place began circulating in hallways. These were small, insidious moves, almost invisible, but Emily recognized them immediately. She had faced hostile environments in deployment zones, and this felt eerily similar. The enemy was invisible, the danger constant. Later that day, Drayton's aides summoned Emily to a closed-door briefing. The air in the room was thick, almost suffocating, as she walked in. Drayton was already seated, his expression unreadable. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he spoke, his voice calm but layered with an unmistakable edge. "Lieutenant Commander Hart, your performance this morning has caught my attention in ways I cannot entirely ignore. Some have expressed concerns about your conduct, specifically about your willingness to challenge authority publicly. Emily met his gaze, unflinching. Sir, my conduct has been professional. I've acted in accordance with operational standards and mission priorities. Drayton's eyes narrowed. You may perceive it that way, but perception matters as much as reality in leadership. And perception among peers and subordinates is critical. The words were carefully measured, but Emily felt the threat lurking beneath them. She knew that Drayton was preparing to escalate matters, possibly recommending formal disciplinary action. He leaned back in his chair, hands steepled, a predator calculating his next move. I am placing you under review, he said finally, for conduct unbecoming an officer. This is a precautionary measure, nothing more, for now. But I want you to understand the seriousness of this situation. Emily's stomach tightened, but her voice remained steady. Sir, I have always upheld the highest standards. I trust the review will reflect that. Drayton's lips curled into a thin, almost imperceptible smile. We shall see. The moment she left his office, Emily realized the storm had begun in earnest. She returned to her desk to find a flurry of messages waiting, some congratulatory, some wary, others veiled in caution. The message was clear. She was walking a tightrope over a pit of sharp knives, and one misstep could end her career. Over the next few days, the general's campaign escalated. Emily's access to critical meetings was revoked. Orders were rerouted around her, leading her sidelined from projects she had helped design. Subordinates who had previously respected her expertise now hesitated, fearful of aligning too closely with someone under scrutiny. Emily felt the sting of isolation, but she refused to let it show. In the military, composure was as vital as courage, and she maintained both with a quiet determination. Then came the formal recommendation. An official memorandum landed on her desk, stark in its brevity. Lieutenant Commander, Hart is recommended for removal from active duty due to insubordination and conduct unbecoming an officer. Effective immediately, she is suspended from participation in sensitive projects pending review. Emily read the words twice, disbelief mingling with a growing sense of resolve. She had faced hostile fire zones, improvised explosive devices, and months of sleep deprivation in combat operations. But this felt different. This was a war fought with politics and power, a battlefield where reputation was weaponized, and the enemy hid behind uniforms and titles. Her first instinct was shock, but it quickly transformed into action. Emily immediately requested a meeting with her mentor, Captain Rodriguez, a seasoned officer who had guided her through countless deployments and bureaucratic obstacles. In his office, surrounded by shelves of military history books and framed commendations, she laid out the situation. Rodriguez listened carefully, nodding as Emily recounted the sequence of events. He's trying to crush you before you become a threat, he said finally. Marcus Drayton doesn't respond well to challenge. He's been known to take out anyone who embarrasses him. Emily absorbed the warning, the weight of it pressing down on her shoulders. So what do I do? She asked quietly. You fight, but you fight smart, Rodriguez replied. Document everything. Emails, memos, witness statements. Anything that proves your professionalism and disproves his claims. This isn't just about surviving. It's about protecting the integrity of the mission and your team. If you let fear guide you, he wins without lifting a finger. Taking his advice to heart, Emily began meticulously gathering evidence. She spent long nights cross-referencing schedules, saving emails, and compiling records that demonstrated her adherence to protocol. Every detail mattered. Every timestamp could be a lifeline. She knew that one mistake could be used against her, and she refused to give Drayton the slightest advantage. Meanwhile, the general's campaign continued to tighten. Rumors circulated, whispers of rebellion and disobedience that threatened to erode the respect Emily had earned among her peers. She heard from colleagues, some fearful, some encouraging, all navigating the treacherous waters of base politics. Emily realized that survival required not only evidence, but nerves of steel and an unshakable belief in her mission. Then came the first direct confrontation with Drayton in a larger setting. During a strategic planning session, he openly questioned her recommendations, framing them as potential risks rather than solutions. Emily responded calmly, citing specific data and operational principles. The tension in the room was palpable, colleagues shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some admired her courage. Others feared the repercussions. But Emily stood firm, knowing that the truth was her strongest weapon. By the end of the week, it was clear. Drayton's campaign was no longer subtle. It had become a test of endurance and character. Emily understood that she was not merely defending her career. She was defending the integrity of the operations she had been entrusted to protect. Every decision, every word, carried weight. Every action mattered. And somewhere in the back of her mind, Emily knew the next step had to be strategic. She would need allies, evidence, and an appeal to someone with authority high enough to counteract Drayton's influence. But for now, she focused on what she could control: her professionalism, her composure, and her unyielding commitment to truth. That night, alone in her office, Emily stared at the charts and reports spread across her desk. The hum of the fluorescent lights echoed in the quiet room. She realized that she had entered a battlefield unlike any she had faced before, one where courage alone might not be enough. Yet, in the midst of the storm, a flicker of determination burned bright. She would not back down. She would not surrender. And she would prove, once and for all, that integrity could triumph, even in the shadow of power. The morning air at Joint Base Langley Eustis carried the scent of rain, sharp and metallic, as Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart entered her office. Every corner of the base seemed charged with tension. Rumors swirled like smoke, whispers of her insubordination and threats of career-ending consequences. The memorandum recommending her removal had circulated, and the weight of it pressed on her like a physical force. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she set her coffee cup on the desk. She took a deep breath. Survival wasn't just about courage. It was about preparation, precision, and strategy. Her first step was to document everything. Emily pulled up her emails, cross-referencing timestamps, tracking the sequence of communications, and downloading every relevant file. She meticulously compiled a digital timeline of events, mapping the flawed logistics plan, her corrective suggestions, and every interaction with General Drayton. The work was painstaking, requiring long hours and attention to detail that left her eyes aching and her shoulders stiff. Yet she persisted. Every piece of evidence could become a lifeline. Captain Rodriguez stopped by that afternoon, his expression grave. "Emily," he said, setting a folder on her desk, "you need witnesses. Subordinates, peers, anyone who saw what happened or can vouch for your professionalism. But be careful. This is delicate. Drayton is powerful, and some people are too scared to speak." Emily nodded, her mind already calculating. She couldn't force people to support her, but she could ensure that those willing had the documentation to do so. "I understand," she said. "I'll handle it carefully." The first interviews were cautious. A logistics officer, Lieutenant Morales, agreed to speak privately. He admitted that he had been instructed to adjust certain figures to make Drayton's original plan look foolproof. "I didn't want to do it," Morales said quietly, "but I was scared. I thought my career was over if I refused." Emily thanked him, noting down every detail. Evidence like this, first-hand testimony of coercion and manipulation, was critical. Over the next week, Emily systematically interviewed her team, recording statements from officers and enlisted personnel alike. She discovered a pattern. Drayton had been quietly pressuring subordinates to support his narrative, falsifying reports, and undermining her credibility. It was subtle, bureaucratic sabotage designed to make her appear insubordinate. Every piece of testimony strengthened her case, painting a clear picture of manipulation rather than misconduct. Meanwhile, the review board had begun preliminary discussions. Emily knew she was under constant scrutiny. Officers who had once been allies now kept their distance, fearful of repercussions. Every email, every message, every meeting felt like walking a tightrope over a pit. But Emily refused to falter. Each night, she returned to her office, the glow of her laptop illuminating charts, schedules, and statements. The hours stretched into early mornings, but she worked tirelessly, knowing the stakes were her career, reputation, and the integrity of the mission itself. Then came the first sign of hope. Captain Rodriguez secured access to internal security footage, confirming her attendance at critical briefings and interactions with Drayton. This visual evidence corroborated her timeline, countering false claims that she had ignored orders or failed to communicate. Emily added these clips to her dossier, careful to maintain strict chain of custody protocols. One misstep could allow Drayton's allies to dismiss the evidence entirely. Emily also discovered anomalies in Drayton's own documentation. Reports had been altered, some even backdated, to make her appear negligent. The discovery was infuriating. The audacity was staggering, but also crucial. "This is exactly what we needed," Rodriguez said, reviewing the files with her. "You've got proof of intent, not just errors, but a deliberate attempt to discredit you." By now, Emily's schedule was relentless. Days blurred into nights as she prepared her defense, cross-checking every claim against evidence, ensuring that no discrepancy could be exploited. She rehearsed answers to potential questions from the board, anticipating every accusation, every insinuation. Her life outside the base had all but disappeared. Family dinners and social events replaced by charts, statements, and endless cups of coffee. Yet despite the exhaustion, Emily felt a quiet resolve growing. She had faced combat zones, hostile territory, and life-or-death decisions. This was a different kind of battlefield, but the principles were the same: vigilance, courage, and meticulous planning. Then came the pivotal moment, a preliminary meeting with the review board itself. The room was formal, imposing, with a semicircle of senior officers, their expressions unreadable. Emily presented her evidence systematically: emails, logs, security footage, and witness statements. She detailed the manipulation of reports, the intimidation of subordinates, and the falsification of timelines. Her voice was steady, her demeanor composed, even as she felt the weight of dozens of eyes assessing, questioning, and judging. The board asked pointed questions, testing her knowledge, her composure, and her credibility. Emily answered each one with precision, citing timestamps, referencing documentation, and maintaining a calm authority that contrasted sharply with Drayton's prior accusations. By the end of the session, the board had a clear understanding. Emily was the victim of a calculated campaign to undermine her, not a rogue officer committing infractions. Even with the initial success, Emily knew the battle was far from over. Drayton still wielded influence, and she was aware that allies could falter under pressure. Every day required vigilance, every document needed verification, every witness statement required protection. She coordinated with Rodriguez to secure copies of all evidence, ensuring redundancy in case Drayton attempted to tamper with files. Amid the pressure, Emily allowed herself rare moments of reflection. She remembered her first deployment, the sense of responsibility she had felt for her team's safety. She thought of the soldiers relying on accurate planning, the lives that could be at risk if truth was buried under politics. That memory fueled her determination, reminding her why she had chosen this path, not for glory, not for rank, but for duty, integrity, and the people who depended on her. As weeks passed, the evidence mounted, and Emily's position strengthened. Yet she remained cautious, never underestimating Drayton's persistence. Every email, every meeting, every casual remark could be weaponized. But with meticulous preparation, she had turned the tide. Her documentation and witness statements had created a fortress around her credibility, a shield built not on fear or arrogance, but on unwavering commitment to truth. Finally, after endless days of preparation, Emily felt the first real glimmer of hope. The preliminary review had gone in her favor, and the board was now in possession of irrefutable evidence against Drayton's claims. She allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, to acknowledge that months of tireless work had brought her closer to vindication. Yet she knew the path ahead remained perilous. The formal hearing, overseen by senior officers with the power to decide her fate, would be the ultimate test. Emily's resolve had hardened. She was no longer just defending herself. She was standing for every officer, soldier, and subordinate who might one day face abuse of power. Her journey through intimidation, sabotage, and manipulation had revealed the fragility of rank when decoupled from integrity. And she knew, deep down, that victory required more than evidence. It demanded courage, patience, and the unshakable belief that truth, when presented clearly and uncompromisingly, could triumph over corruption. As she left the office that evening, rain tapping lightly against the windows, Emily felt a quiet sense of determination settle over her. She had survived the first assaults, gathered the ammunition of evidence, and prepared for the ultimate confrontation. The investigation had revealed the battlefield, exposed the enemy's tactics, and given her the tools she needed. But the war was far from over, and Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart was ready. The office was quiet that evening, the hum of the air conditioning filling the space as Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart sat at her desk, staring at the blank screen of her laptop. The weight of the past weeks bore down on her. The whisper campaigns, the falsified reports, the sleepless nights spent gathering evidence. Even though the preliminary investigation had favored her, the looming threat of General Marcus Drayton's influence still hung over her like a storm cloud. The formal hearing was scheduled in 2 weeks, and Emily knew she needed an edge, someone in a position of authority to see the truth clearly. Her mind returned to Admiral Sarah Wexler, a woman she had briefly met during a senior officer's seminar. Wexler's reputation was formidable. She was known for decisiveness, integrity, and a refusal to tolerate bureaucracy when it obstructed justice. Emily remembered the words the Admiral had spoken during a lecture. True leadership is measured not by rank, but by courage in the face of injustice. That phrase had stayed with her, a lodestar in the dark days of Drayton's campaign. With deliberate care, Emily began drafting a personal letter. She knew it had to be concise, factual, and impossible to dismiss. It wasn't an appeal to sympathy, but to reason, integrity, and duty. She began by outlining the situation: Drayton's false accusations, the coerced statements of subordinates, and the manipulated reports, providing timestamps and specific examples. Each sentence was precise, each claim backed by evidence. "Ma'am," she typed, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline pulsing in her veins, "I am reaching out because the integrity of our operations and the safety of our personnel are at stake. I have been subject to a campaign of false allegations orchestrated by Major General Marcus Drayton, who has sought to undermine my credibility and remove me from active duty. Enclosed are documents, communications, and witness statements that illustrate the extent of this manipulation." Emily paused, reflecting on the tone. She could have infused the letter with emotion, but she knew the Admiral would value facts above all else. Every word had to convey urgency and professionalism. She added a personal note, careful to remain respectful but firm. "I am confident in my service record and in the validity of my conduct. I seek not favor, but the impartial review and correction of a system currently compromised by personal vendetta. Attachments followed. Copies of emails, project logs, security footage summaries, witness statements, and the carefully constructed timeline of events. Emily triple-checked each file, ensuring nothing could be misinterpreted or misrepresented. The letter was a shield and a spear, a clear, irrefutable presentation of the truth. After reviewing it one final time, Emily hesitated, staring at the send button. This was a gamble. If Wexler ignored it or failed to act, the momentum could shift back in Drayton's favor. But she also knew that waiting passively would accomplish nothing. With a deep breath, she clicked send, watching the encrypted message vanish into the secure Navy communication system. The next 48 hours were a test of patience. Emily focused on her routine, attending briefings and checking reports, but her mind never strayed far from the unknown response. Each email ping, each phone call made her pulse quicken. Then, late on the second day, an encrypted message arrived in her inbox. Received. Review in progress. Wexler's office. Relief washed over her briefly, quickly replaced by renewed focus. Emily knew Wexler was reviewing the case personally, a rarity for an officer at her level. The Admiral didn't intervene lightly. This meant that the facts had reached someone capable counteracting Drayton's influence, someone with the authority to ensure justice. The next days were tense. Emily's colleagues noticed subtle shifts in the base. Certain officers who had been vocal in their support now seemed emboldened, while others who had whispered caution retreated further. The undercurrent of fear and suspicion began to ripple differently, as though a new, unseen force had entered the equation. Emily could almost sense it. The tide was shifting. Then came the phone call. The secure line buzzed in her office late one evening. Emily picked it up, her pulse quickening. Lieutenant Commander Hart? The voice was calm, authoritative, yet carried warmth. It was Admiral Wexler herself. Yes, ma'am, Emily replied, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. I have reviewed your submission, Wexler said. I've seen the documentation, the communications, and the testimony. I want you to know that I understand exactly what you have endured. You acted with integrity, professionalism, and courage. Major General Drayton's attempts to undermine you are clear and documented. Emily exhaled, a mixture of relief and disbelief. Thank you, ma'am. I wasn't sure if it would reach the right eyes. Wexler's voice was firm. It did. And now, the responsibility rests with me to ensure that justice prevails. You are not only cleared of wrongdoing, but recognized as having demonstrated exemplary conduct in the face of systemic obstruction. Be ready. Changes will be enacted swiftly. The conversation lasted only minutes, but it left Emily with a profound sense of vindication and cautious optimism. Wexler's intervention signaled a turning point, not just for Emily, but for the broader system she had sought to protect. It was rare, perhaps unprecedented, for an admiral to directly involve herself at this level, but Wexler clearly understood the stakes. In the days following the call, Emily's office became a quiet battlefield of preparation. She refined her reports, ensured her documentation was impeccable, and coordinated with her allies, including Captain Rodriguez, to safeguard every piece of evidence. The formal hearing loomed, but the psychological shift was unmistakable. She now had an advocate at the highest level, a guardian whose authority could counterbalance Drayton's influence. Emily reflected on the journey so far. Months of intimidation, manipulation, and bureaucratic obstruction had tested her limits. She had faced the fear of career-ending false accusations, the isolation of colleagues' cautious silence, and the crushing weight of injustice. And yet, through meticulous preparation, unwavering adherence to facts, and the courage to reach out to someone she respected, she had created a path toward vindication. The storm was not yet over. Drayton still held power, and the formal hearing would be his final attempt to consolidate control. But Emily now knew she was not alone. She had armed herself with evidence, allies, and the backing of one of the Navy's most formidable leaders. The letter she had sent, born of desperation and principle, had become the catalyst for change. That evening, Emily allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. Sitting at her desk, reviewing the timelines and witness statements one last time, she felt the first true sense of hope since the ordeal began. The road ahead remained treacherous, but the tide had shifted. Justice, tempered by courage and integrity, had a chance to prevail. As she powered down her laptop and gathered her notes, Emily felt a profound sense of resolve. She had learned something essential. Sometimes, survival and justice require reaching beyond the immediate chain of command, appealing to those with the vision and authority to see the truth. She had done so with precision, discretion, and courage, and the outcome was already beginning to unfold. Outside, the rain had slowed, leaving the base washed in a soft, reflective glow. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart walked toward her quarters, the weight on her shoulders slightly lighter, her steps purposeful. The coming confrontation would test her again, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a quiet certainty. She was not fighting blindly. She was fighting with the force of truth, and now she had an ally who could ensure that truth would not be silenced. The letter had changed everything. The day of the formal review arrived with a tense air that seemed to cling to every corner of the Washington, D.C. military headquarters. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart walked through the corridors, her boots echoing on the polished floors, the sound sharp in the silent building. Officers whispered behind closed doors, their glances ranging from cautious curiosity to open admiration. Today, everything she had prepared, every report, every piece of evidence, every witness statement would be scrutinized in front of those with the power to decide her fate. In the main chamber, a semicircle of senior officers awaited. The walls were lined with portraits of military legends, their eyes seeming to follow Emily as she approached. At the center of the room sat Major General Marcus Drayton, his posture rigid, his jaw set in a firm line. He had expected victory. His carefully orchestrated plan to expel Emily had reached its peak. Yet, there was an undercurrent of tension, even in his demeanor, a small hint of unease that he could not fully conceal. Emily took her place, folders neatly stacked, her laptop open, and her evidence organized in precise order. She felt the weight of countless weeks of preparation pressing against her shoulders, yet she stood straight, composed, unwavering. Her eyes scanned the room, noting every subtle shift, officers shifting in their seats, the careful observation of the board, Drayton's almost imperceptible tightening of his hands. The review began with formalities, voices measured, ceremonial. Drayton launched into his prepared narrative, detailing accusations of insubordination, misconduct, and alleged negligence. Each point was carefully crafted to make Emily appear reckless, disobedient, and unfit for command. Yet Emily remained silent, letting him present his case fully, her mind rehearsing responses, anticipating his every move. Then, the doors opened unexpectedly. Silence fell across the chamber as Admiral Sarah Wexler entered. Her presence was commanding, her uniform impeccable, the medals and ribbons on her chest reflecting authority and decades of service. The officers straightened, and even Drayton's expression flickered with surprise. "Admiral Wexler," someone whispered. Wexler's voice cut through the tension with calm authority. "Good morning. I understand there are matters requiring my attention." She did not sit. She did not hesitate. Instead, she strode to the front of the room, placing a hand lightly on the lectern, her gaze sweeping across the assembly before settling on Drayton. "I will review the evidence personally." Drayton's carefully constructed confidence wavered. He cleared his throat, but found his words faltering under her presence. Emily felt a flicker of hope, tempered by the awareness that this confrontation would be critical. Wexler began systematically reviewing the documentation, the emails, the reports, the manipulated schedules, the witness statements. She spoke quietly at first, analyzing line by line, demonstrating an understanding that only decades of experience could produce. "General Drayton," Wexler said finally, her voice firm, precise, cutting through the tension. "These reports indicate a pattern of manipulation. Certain documents have been altered, others falsified to create a narrative against Lieutenant Commander Hart. Witnesses report coercion and intimidation." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Explain these discrepancies." Drayton shifted in his seat, his composure cracking. "Admiral, my intent." "Intent is irrelevant when actions compromise integrity," Wexler interrupted, her tone unwavering. She gestured to the evidence arrayed on Emily's laptop. "This is not an allegation. This is documented fact. Lieutenant Commander Hart has conducted herself with professionalism, precision, and unwavering commitment to duty. The inconsistencies in your reports and the testimonies of those involved leave no doubt. She is the victim of orchestrated manipulation." The chamber was silent, the weight of truth settling over everyone present. Officers exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, others scribbling notes. Drayton's face reddened, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and mounting panic. He attempted to interject, to defend his position, but Wexler's presence and mastery of the facts rendered him powerless. "Your attempt to undermine her," Wexler continued, "violates not only regulations, but the ethical standards we uphold. Lieutenant Commander Hart followed protocol, presented facts, and prioritized operational safety over personal politics. Your actions are documented, verifiable, and in direct conflict with the principles of command." Emily felt her heart beat faster, a mixture of relief and adrenaline. For weeks, she had feared this moment. The public exposure of her struggle, the scrutiny of her peers, the potential for misinterpretation. Yet, here she stood vindicated, her meticulous preparation validated by one of the most respected leaders in the Navy. Drayton's attempts to respond faltered. Every argument he made was met with calm, methodical rebuttal from Wexler. She cited emails, timestamps, witness testimonies, each piece dismantling his narrative with surgical precision. It was clear that the campaign he had orchestrated was unraveling before him, evidence by evidence, fact by fact. The board members leaned forward, taking notes, nodding subtly as Wexler presented the case. Emily observed quietly, her posture steady, though inside a surge of emotion threatened to overwhelm her. Years of discipline, training, and courage had led to this moment. Weeks of manipulation, false accusations, and silent threats were being exposed. The truth was winning. Wexler's voice lowered, carrying weight and authority. Lieutenant Commander Hart demonstrated leadership under pressure, integrity in the face of obstruction, and unwavering dedication to the mission. These qualities are exemplary. General Drayton, your actions, by contrast, demonstrate a misuse of authority and a deliberate attempt to compromise a subordinate's career. Drayton sat frozen, the enormity of the situation finally settling upon him. The room was silent, the only sounds the scratching of pens on paper and the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Wexler turned to Emily, her gaze steady, her expression one of respect. "Lieutenant Commander Hart, you are cleared of all allegations. Furthermore, your conduct merits recognition." The formal proceedings continued for another hour, but the momentum had shifted irreversibly. Officers who had feared Drayton's influence now openly acknowledged Emily's professionalism. Witnesses confirmed the coercion and falsifications, their statements corroborated by Wexler's meticulous review. By the time the hearing adjourned, the outcome was clear. Emily's reputation was restored, and Drayton's authority had been challenged in a manner he could not control. As Emily left the chamber, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. The confrontation had been harrowing, but it had proven that truth, preparation, and courage could prevail against even the most entrenched power. Outside, the sky was overcast, but the air felt lighter, charged with the sense of justice achieved. In the following days, Wexler initiated administrative review actions against Drayton, ensuring that the general's misconduct could not influence other proceedings or personnel. Emily returned to her work with renewed confidence, her focus sharpened by the knowledge that integrity had not only survived, but prevailed. That evening, she sat in her office, reviewing her notes one last time. The confrontation had been decisive, but Emily understood that vigilance remained essential. The military hierarchy was vast and complex, and while one battle had been won, the struggle to maintain ethical standards required continuous effort. Yet, in that moment, a quiet satisfaction settled over her. She had faced intimidation, false accusations, and systemic obstruction. She had endured weeks of uncertainty, meticulous preparation, and personal strain. And through it all, she had remained true to her principles. The confrontation had changed everything. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart had survived, vindicated, and proven that courage, integrity, and meticulous preparation could triumph over even the most powerful adversary. The days following the confrontation with Admiral Wexler were tense, but the atmosphere at Joint Base Langley Eustis began to shift. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart returned to her office, feeling the weight of weeks of uncertainty begin to lift. The formal hearing had cleared her of all allegations, and Wexler's direct intervention had dismantled Major General Marcus Drayton's campaign against her. Yet the aftermath required careful navigation. Power in the military hierarchy was never easily unbalanced, and Emily knew that vigilance remained essential. Emily's first priority was her team. Soldiers and junior officers, who had witnessed the unfolding events, were still wary of speaking openly. Many had followed orders under duress from Drayton, and fear lingered like a shadow. Emily called a meeting in the main briefing room, her tone firm but empathetic. "I know the past weeks have been difficult. I want to assure you that truth and integrity prevailed. No one will be penalized for supporting accuracy and professionalism." Her words were met with tentative nods. Slowly, confidence returned. Officers began sharing information they had withheld out of fear, providing additional clarity on Drayton's manipulations. Emily documented every statement meticulously. These testimonies reinforced the evidence already submitted to Admiral Wexler, creating an unassailable record of the general's misconduct. Meanwhile, Wexler's office took decisive action. A formal investigation into Drayton's conduct was launched, examining his falsification of reports, coercion of subordinates, and abuse of authority. Administrative measures temporarily removed him from command, effectively neutralizing his influence on ongoing operations. The ripple effect across the base was immediate. Officers who had once feared speaking truth began to emerge, reassured that integrity would be protected and recognized. Emily felt a profound mixture of relief and cautious triumph. She had endured weeks of isolation, intimidation, and professional attacks, yet she had survived. She also recognized the broader significance. Her struggle highlighted vulnerabilities in the system, exposing how unchecked power could compromise both individuals and operational effectiveness. Her victory was not merely personal. It had implications for the ethical standards of the entire command. In the quiet of her office, Emily reflected on the battle she had fought. Every email, report, and witness statement had been a lifeline. Every sleepless night had reinforced her resolve. The confrontation with Drayton had been tense and emotionally taxing, but Wexler's intervention had tipped the scales. Emily allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, a rare pause in the relentless pace of military life. before returning to the practicalities of her duties. Drayton, meanwhile, was grappling with the consequences. Stripped of command and facing a formal inquiry, he realized the limits of his influence. Officers who had once obeyed his every order now maintained professional distance, recognizing the serious ethical breaches he had committed. Rumors of his pending reassignment circulated, further diminishing his stature. For the first time, Drayton confronted the personal cost of prioritizing ego over duty. Emily, however, chose not to dwell on the general's downfall. Her focus remained on the mission, the personnel under her command, and the integrity of operations. She began reviewing pending projects, ensuring that timelines, logistics, and deployment plans were corrected and fully transparent. Subordinates, now reassured of protection and recognition, collaborated with renewed confidence. Emily observed a subtle but significant cultural shift. Accountability and professionalism were being prioritized over fear and obedience. The culmination of this process was the formal administrative review, presided over by a board appointed by Admiral Wexler. Emily presented updates, verified reports, and highlighted the corrective measures she had implemented to restore operational integrity. Each point reinforced the conclusion. Her actions had been appropriate, principled, and necessary. The board members, impressed by her composure and thoroughness, unanimously supported her conduct. As the investigation concluded, Drayton faced official reprimands and reassignment. His removal sent a clear message throughout the military hierarchy. Abuse of authority and manipulation of subordinates would not be tolerated. Emily's vindication was more than personal triumph. It became a precedent, demonstrating that courage, preparation, and adherence to principles could counteract entrenched power. The base slowly returned to normal operations, but the impact of the events lingered. Officers were more willing to speak up. Checks and balances were reinforced, and Emily's team operated with renewed focus and confidence. She became a quiet symbol of resilience, earning respect not only for her professional expertise, but for the integrity she had demonstrated under extreme pressure. Emily took a moment one evening to reflect on the journey. Months of intimidation, false accusations, and bureaucratic obstruction had tested her limits. She remembered the long nights spent compiling evidence, the careful coordination with witnesses, and the anxiety of waiting for Wexler's intervention. The victory was hard won, and she understood its significance. It wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about reinforcing the principles of honesty, accountability, and ethical leadership. Despite the triumph, Emily remained humble. She acknowledged the support of Captain Rodriguez, the courage of subordinates who had come forward, and the decisive intervention of Admiral Wexler. Each had played a vital role, yet she recognized that the integrity of her own actions had been the foundation. She had stood firm in the face of fear, relying on preparation, evidence, and unyielding commitment to truth. In the weeks that followed, Emily resumed her responsibilities with renewed purpose. She implemented ethical oversight measures, ensured transparent reporting, and reinforced the importance of principled decision-making within her team. Officers and enlisted personnel responded positively, demonstrating increased morale, professionalism, and trust. The lessons learned from the ordeal had been internalized, creating a more resilient and accountable command culture. Emily's experience also prompted discussions at higher levels of the military. Reports of her case were studied, highlighting vulnerabilities in command oversight, the risks of unchecked authority, and the importance of clear, verifiable evidence in maintaining accountability. Her actions had far-reaching implications, influencing policy, training, and the ethical framework within which officers operated. Amid this period of adjustment, Emily allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Standing on the deck overlooking the base's training grounds, she watched soldiers practice maneuvers, their movements precise and coordinated. She thought of the months of struggle, the tension, and the confrontation that had restored not only her reputation, but the integrity of her command. A sense of quiet satisfaction settled over her. She had survived, prevailed, and strengthened the principles she valued most. Emily understood that vigilance would always be required. The military was a complex institution, and challenges to integrity could arise anywhere. Yet she also recognized the enduring power of preparation, courage, and ethical leadership. She had faced the highest levels of authority, stood unwavering in the face of manipulation, and emerged not only vindicated, but strengthened. In the end, Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart had done more than defend herself. She had reinforced the values of accountability, transparency, and courage, leaving a lasting mark on her command and the officers who served under her. The storm had passed, but its lessons endured, shaping the culture and principles of those who followed in her footsteps. The tables had turned, and in that reversal, Emily found not only justice, but a profound affirmation of the power of integrity in even the most challenging circumstances. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart had returned to a semblance of normalcy, yet her mind remained alert, aware that the final steps in her journey were approaching. Drayton's reassignment had removed the immediate threat, but recognition from the highest echelons of the Navy had yet to arrive. Emily had worked tirelessly to restore the operational integrity of her command, oversee her team, and ensure the lessons learned from Drayton's campaign were implemented. Every day was an exercise in rebuilding trust, establishing transparency, and demonstrating the professionalism that had always defined her career. Then, one quiet afternoon, her secure phone rang. Emily recognized the number immediately. It was the Admiral's office. Her pulse quickened. She excused herself from her office and answered, the hum of the base around her fading as she focused entirely on the call. "Lieutenant Commander Hart?" The voice was crisp, authoritative, yet tinged with warmth. It was Admiral Sarah Wexler herself. "Yes, ma'am," Emily replied, striving to keep her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I wanted to speak to you personally," Wexler said. "Your conduct throughout this ordeal has been exemplary. You acted with integrity, professionalism, and courage in circumstances that would have tested even the most seasoned officers. Your meticulous documentation, leadership under pressure, and unwavering commitment to truth have not gone unnoticed." Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. She had feared the long shadow of Drayton's manipulation would linger. Yet here was the highest-ranking officer she respected most, acknowledging the full scope of her efforts. "Thank you, ma'am," she said quietly. "I couldn't have done it without the support of my team and the guidance you provided." Wexler's tone became more deliberate, conveying the weight of the next announcement. "Because of your actions and the example you've set, I am recommending you for formal recognition and promotion. The recommendation will go to the Chief of Naval Operations, and I expect it to be approved without delay. Your leadership has set a new standard for ethical conduct and operational excellence." Emily's mind raced. Recognition and promotion had always been milestones she aspired to, but the significance of this moment extended far beyond rank. It symbolized validation, a public acknowledgement that courage and integrity could triumph over intimidation and corruption. "Ma'am," Emily said, her voice steady now, "I am deeply honored. I will continue to serve with the same dedication and commitment." "I know you will," Wexler replied. "You've demonstrated what it means to lead with both skill and principle. Keep your focus, continue to mentor those under your command, and maintain the standard you've set. Others will follow your example." The call ended, and Emily leaned back in her chair, absorbing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Her phone rested on the desk, still warm from the conversation, but it was the words, not the device, that resonated. Recognition from Admiral Wexler was more than personal. It was symbolic, a message to the entire command structure that integrity and courage were paramount. The news spread quickly across the base. Officers and enlisted personnel alike began to acknowledge Emily's perseverance and leadership. Conversations that had previously been hushed now carried open admiration. Subordinates expressed relief and respect, while peers approached her to share gratitude for demonstrating that truth and professionalism could withstand even the most intense challenges. Emily noticed the change, a tangible shift in morale and trust throughout her command. The promotion process began swiftly. Documentation of her accomplishments, leadership, and the resolution of Drayton's misconduct was compiled and submitted to the Chief of Naval Operations. Supporting statements from Admiral Wexler, Captain Rodriguez, and multiple officers served as compelling evidence. Emily's meticulous record-keeping, strategic decisions, and ethical guidance were laid bare for review, a testament to both her competence and her resilience. While awaiting formal approval, Emily continued her duties with renewed vigor. She held meetings with her team, emphasizing transparency and accountability. Training schedules were reviewed, logistical plans were corrected, and operational protocols reinforced. Every action she took reflected the values she had fought to uphold, ensuring that the lessons from the Drayton incident were institutionalized. Her leadership style, characterized by fairness, clarity, and ethical rigor, inspired confidence across ranks. One afternoon, Emily found herself walking through the training grounds, observing soldiers executing drills. Their movements were precise, disciplined, yet infused with a sense of purpose and pride. She reflected on the months of struggle, the whispers, the manipulations, the sleepless nights spent gathering evidence, the confrontation, the vindication, and now the Admiral's recognition were the culmination of perseverance, preparation, and unwavering adherence to principle. As she returned to her office, a secure message arrived confirming the formal approval of her promotion. The letter, signed by the Chief of Naval Operations, recognized Emily for outstanding leadership, integrity, and operational excellence. She would be elevated to commander, an acknowledgement of both her professional competence and her moral fortitude. The significance of the moment was not lost on Emily. The promotion was more than a career milestone. It was a reaffirmation of the principles she had fought to protect. Her team celebrated cautiously at first, aware of the delicate balance of military protocol, but the joy and respect were palpable. Emily addressed them quietly, emphasizing the collective effort that had allowed justice to prevail. "Today," she said, "we acknowledge not just an individual achievement, but the strength of integrity and accountability. Each of you played a role in ensuring that truth prevailed. Let this serve as a reminder that ethical leadership is not optional, it is essential. We are stronger when we uphold our principles, even in the face of intimidation." Her words were met with nods, smiles, and quiet applause. The culture of fear that Drayton had instilled was dissipating, replaced by a renewed commitment to transparency, ethical conduct, and collective responsibility. Emily realized that her victory had transformed not only her career, but the environment around her. She had turned a systemically challenging situation into an opportunity for growth, mentorship, and leadership that others could follow. That evening, Emily allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. Sitting in her office, reviewing her notes and reports, she recognized the arc of her journey. From the initial whispers of sabotage to the meticulously gathered evidence, the intervention of Admiral Wexler, the confrontation, and the eventual promotion, each step had demanded courage, patience, and unwavering adherence to principle. She thought of the lessons learned. Preparation is power, integrity is non-negotiable, and courage must be paired with strategic action. Emily had navigated a complex web of professional politics, threats, and manipulations, emerging not just vindicated, but strengthened. Her actions had reinforced the ethical foundation of her command and provided a roadmap for others facing similar challenges. As she powered down her laptop and gathered her things, Emily felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The journey had been arduous, yet the outcome demonstrated the enduring power of truth, preparation, and leadership grounded in principle. Her career had been validated, her team strengthened, and the integrity of her command reaffirmed. Commander Emily Hart left her office that night with a quiet sense of pride. The base was calm, the lights reflecting off the polished floors, and she walked with the confidence of someone who had faced immense challenges and emerged not only victorious, but transformed. The Admiral's call had not only recognized her accomplishments, but had reinforced the idea that courage and integrity, when paired with preparation and strategic action, could overcome even the most formidable obstacles. The call had changed everything, and Emily was ready for whatever lay ahead. The weeks and months following Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart's promotion to commander brought a renewed sense of purpose, both for her and the personnel under her command. The events that had threatened her career had not only been resolved, but had transformed the culture of the base. The shadow cast by Major General Marcus Drayton's manipulation had lifted, replaced by a climate of transparency, trust, and accountability. Emily's leadership had become a benchmark, a model for officers who faced challenges of integrity and power. Emily had resumed oversight of operational planning with renewed energy. She meticulously reviewed every logistics schedule, every deployment plan, and every communication channel. Subordinates who had previously hesitated to speak now shared observations, flagged potential issues, and offered solutions openly. It was a culture rooted in professionalism, strengthened by trust, and inspired by the example Emily had set. Her mentorship extended beyond daily operations. Junior officers sought her guidance not only in logistics and strategy, but in ethical decision-making. Emily established weekly workshops focused on leadership, integrity, and accountability, a forum for discussion, reflection, and training that would ripple across the military hierarchy. Her experiences were shared candidly, highlighting the importance of documentation, strategic thinking, and the courage to confront manipulation with professionalism and evidence. The recognition she had earned extended beyond the base. Reports of her conduct and the subsequent correction of Drayton's misconduct reached higher echelons of the Navy. Other commands studied her case, using it as a blueprint for addressing internal challenges and preventing abuse of authority. Emily's story became a teaching tool, illustrating how adherence to principle, coupled with strategic action, could uphold the integrity of the service. Despite her professional demands, Emily found moments of reflection. She walked along the base's training grounds at dawn, observing soldiers execute drills with precision and purpose. She remembered the weeks of uncertainty, the quiet intimidation, and the painstaking work of gathering evidence. Every drill, every maneuver, every act of disciplined teamwork reminded her of the broader mission. The lives and effectiveness of the people under her leadership depended on integrity and preparation. Emily's efforts were not unnoticed by Admiral Wexler, who continued to offer guidance and mentorship. In private meetings, Wexler emphasized the importance of maintaining vigilance and mentoring others. "Commander Hart," Wexler said one afternoon, "what you've accomplished is exceptional. But the real victory lies in what you pass on, the principles, the discipline, and the courage to act ethically, even when it's difficult." Emily nodded, understanding that the Admiral's words carried both affirmation and a challenge to ensure that her legacy endured. The administrative fallout for Drayton continued. Investigations confirmed his misconduct, and formal reprimands were issued. He was reassigned to a non-command role, stripped of responsibilities that could allow him to repeat such actions. The ripple effect of this resolution reinforced a clear message throughout the military hierarchy. Abuse of authority and intimidation would not be tolerated. Emily's perseverance had catalyzed a systemic correction, strengthening accountability at multiple levels. Within the base, Emily's presence became a stabilizing force. She encouraged officers to document decisions meticulously, to speak up when they observed discrepancies, and to maintain professional integrity, even under pressure. Her team's morale and operational effectiveness soared. Orders were executed with precision, logistical plans became models of efficiency, and communication channels operated transparently. Emily's leadership demonstrated that ethical conduct and professional success were not mutually exclusive, but deeply intertwined. Emily's influence extended beyond her immediate command. Invitations arrived for her to speak at leadership seminars, military ethics workshops, and strategic planning conferences. Her story, framed by real-life challenges and triumphs, became a source of inspiration for officers navigating complex hierarchies, showing that courage, preparation, and integrity could overcome systemic challenges. Emily shared practical strategies, the importance of meticulous documentation, maintaining professional composure, gathering corroborative evidence, and seeking allies in positions of oversight. Her personal growth was equally profound. The experience had tested every aspect of her character: resilience, patience, ethical judgment, and leadership. She had learned that confronting intimidation required both courage and strategic planning. She had discovered the power of evidence, preparation, and the support of mentors. And most importantly, she had affirmed her belief that integrity was not negotiable, even in the face of systemic challenges. The culmination of her journey was recognized in a formal ceremony. Surrounded by colleagues, subordinates, and mentors, Emily received commendations from the Navy, honoring her leadership, integrity, and courage under pressure. Admiral Wexler delivered the keynote, praising Emily's unwavering adherence to principle and her role in restoring accountability. The ceremony was more than a personal accolade. It was a public affirmation of ethical leadership and the enduring power of professional courage. Emily's story became a touchstone within the military. It was cited in training manuals, leadership courses, and ethics workshops. Officers across commands studied her case as an example of confronting manipulation with professionalism, documenting evidence with precision, and leveraging support from ethical authority. The legacy of her actions extended far beyond her immediate environment, shaping a culture that valued integrity as highly as operational success. Even as recognition and accolades accumulated, Emily remained focused on her responsibilities. She continued mentoring her team, refining operational strategies, and fostering a culture of transparency. Her leadership was characterized not by ego, but by principled guidance, a steady commitment to ethical conduct, and a dedication to the people she served. Emily had transformed adversity into an opportunity for lasting impact, leaving an indelible mark on the military institution she had dedicated herself to. In private moments, Emily reflected on the journey from the initial whispers of false allegations to the confrontation, vindication, and eventual recognition. She remembered the fear, the isolation, and the painstaking work of building her case. She remembered Admiral Wexler's call, the confrontation with Drayton, and the affirmation of her leadership. And she recognized that the true triumph was not just survival, but transformation, the transformation of herself, her team, and the culture around her. As the sun set over the base, casting a warm glow on the training grounds, Emily walked among the soldiers, observing their discipline and focus. She felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The struggle had tested every limit, but it had resulted in a legacy of courage, ethical leadership, and systemic change. Her journey had demonstrated that even the most formidable obstacles could be overcome with preparation, principle, and unwavering commitment. Lieutenant Commander Emily Hart, now commander, had not only survived the storm, but had turned it into an enduring triumph. Her story became a symbol, a reminder that integrity, courage, and strategic action could prevail over intimidation and corruption. She had fought for herself, for her team, and for the principles that defined the Navy. And in doing so, She had ensured that her legacy would inspire generations of officers to come. The tables had turned. Justice had prevailed. Integrity had been reaffirmed. And Emily Hart had emerged not only vindicated, but transformed. Her leadership, courage, and unwavering commitment to principle leaving a lasting mark on the Navy and the lives of those she led. The storm was over. The legacy remained. And Commander Emily Hart stood ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Her triumph both personal and enduring, a beacon of ethical leadership for all who would follow.